In MMA, we're used to seeing fighters give it their all in the cage. But for every second a fighter spends in an actual fight, an hour is spent in the gym. So, what MMA gyms are out there? What do they teach their fighters? What are their histories? And what kind of style can we expect from fighters who train at a particular gym? Well, I'll be going over that and more in this video. So, here are the stories and styles of every MMA gym explained. And once you're done with this video, please go check out the first video I made about this topic. Fight Club Akhmat, which is also known as Akhmat MMA, is a professional MMA club that is headquartered in Grozny, which is the capital of the Chechen Republic. The club was founded in 2013 by Ramzan Kadyrov, the head of the Chechen Republic, a man who is widely seen in the international community as a dictator and human rights abuser. Fight Club Akhmat is one of the largest fight teams in the world, reportedly boasting over 10,000 members, ranging from young boys to top-level pro fighters, with most of those fighters hailing from countries that were formerly a part of the Soviet Union. In addition to their headquarters in Chechnya, the team has training facilities spread throughout Russia. Fight Club Akhmat is named after Ramzan's father, Akhmat Kadyrov, a Chechen political figure. Akhmat fought for Chechen independence from the Russian Federation during the First Chechen War that took place from 1994 to 1996, but switched sides to supporting the Russian Federation after the outbreak of the Second Chechen War in 1999. Akhmat Kadyrov stated that he switched to supporting the Russian Federation because he detested the radical jihadist elements among the Chechen rebels. However, among many Chechens, Akhmat was seen as a traitor who sold out his people to the Russians, thereby betraying his Islamic faith by allying himself with the Orthodox Christians who controlled the Russian Federation. In 2000, Vladimir Putin appointed Akhmat as the first president of the Chechen Republic. But 4 years later, Akhmat was assassinated with a bomb, with Chechen Islamists claiming credit for the attack. After Akhmat's assassination, Vladimir Putin appointed Ramzan Kadyrov as his replacement. In return for his undying loyalty to Putin, Ramzan Kadyrov receives complete control over the Chechen Republic and its people. This means that Kadyrov can build palaces for himself, buy fleets of expensive cars, and host lavish parties for his family and close friends. To give you an example of his power and corruption, just recently, he appointed his teenage son to oversee local tax collection in Chechnya, despite his son having basically no credentials whatsoever. And of course, as a massive fan of mixed martial arts, Ramzan Kadyrov is free to invest as much as he wants into developing Fight Club Akhmat, and there is no denying that this has produced exceptional results. Notably, the current UFC middleweight champion, Khamzat Chimaev, has not only trained at Fight Club Akhmat, but is also a member of Ramzan's inner circle, with Kadyrov buying Khamzat gifts and attending Khamzat's wedding. Khamzat has also trained with Kadyrov and his sons in the past, and even cornered Kadyrov's sons in their MMA fights. In addition to Khamzat, the UFC light heavyweight champion Magomed Ankalaev is also a member of Akhmat Fight Club, and has expressed his thanks to the team and Ramzan Kadyrov in a statement posted to Instagram after winning his title at UFC 313. Other notable fighters who are training at Fight Club Akhmat or are associated with the team include UFC bantamweight Said Nurmagomedov and UFC middleweight Nursultan Ruziboyev. The gym also has hundreds of elite fighters competing outside of the UFC. Although, let's be honest, the reason why they compete outside of the UFC is probably because those organizations don't do drug testing. It is also worth noting that Henry Cejudo, Justin Gaethje, and Kamaru Usman traveled to Chechnya in the past for the birthday party of one of Kadyrov's sons, where they shot RPGs and trained at Fight Club Akhmat. And in the past, former UFC heavyweight champion Fabricio Verdum signed with Fight Club Akhmat as an ambassador for the team. Due to the sheer number of fighters who trained at Fight Club Akhmat, it's sort of impossible to narrow down a concrete fight style for the team. However, due to most of its members coming from former Soviet countries, almost all of Fight Club Akhmat's talent have a background in wrestling, sambo, or judo. This means that those who train at a Fight Club Akhmat are guaranteed to be competent in both striking and grappling, albeit I personally do think that they tend to have more specialists than the Dagestanis who train with Khabib Nurmagomedov and Islam Makhachev. The existence of Fight Club Akhmat fulfills multiple crucial roles in Kadyrov's rule over Chechnya. In addition to being a gathering place for high-level MMA talent from former Soviet countries, Fight Club Akhmat aids in improving Ramzan Kadyrov's image among the Chechen people. As I said earlier, Akhmat Kadyrov was viewed as a traitor to the Chechen people by Chechen rebels and jihadis, as he allied himself with Vladimir Putin, thereby putting Muslim-majority Chechnya under the control of the Orthodox Christians who run the Russian Federation. By having fighters from Fight Club Akhmat like Khamzat Chimaev succeed internationally, Ramzan Kadyrov solidifies his control over Chechnya by having them become heroes of his regime. Although it's a bit complex, here's the simplest way to put it. Why would a Chechen want to rebel against Ramzan Kadyrov's Putin-backed regime and try to declare independence from the Russian Federation, when their country's greatest sports heroes are all a part of Kadyrov's inner circle? Another function of Fight Club Akhmat is to recruit and train members for the Kadyrovtsi, which are detachments of the Russian National Guard who are loyal to Kadyrov. The Kadyrovtsi have been reported on as being particularly brutal in conflict, with many units being accused of war crimes. Now, based off of what I just said there, joining Fight Club Akhmat might seem like a pretty raw deal, since you end up running the risk of dying mysteriously, as happened to Abdul Karim Idilov, who was Ramzan Kadyrov's former favorite fighter, before Idilov made the mistake of giving out drugs to Kadyrov's inner circle, including Kadyrov's sons. You also might end up becoming a part of the Kadyrovtsi, where you run the risk of getting obliterated by a missile from the Ghost of Kiev. However, there are major benefits to being a member of Fight Club Akhmat, the biggest one being that fighters who train at the team have various expenses, from food to travel to healthcare, paid for. They also receive preferential treatment in the matchmaking for Absolute Championship Akhmat, which is a regional Chechen MMA promotion that is also controlled by Kadyrov. The funding for Fight Club Akhmat and Absolute Championship Akhmat come from the state budget of the Chechen Republic. However, due to the GDP per capita of Chechnya being the second lowest in the Russian Federation at 206,751 rubles, or around 2,400 US dollars, which, for reference, is lower than the GDP per capita of India, the Chechen government receives generous subsidies from the Russian Federation. So basically, Ramzan Kadyrov is the world's biggest welfare queen, and fighters who are members of Fight Club Akhmat are living off the dole paid for by the taxpayers of the Russian Federation. But anyways, some other fun facts about Fight Club Akhmat include the fact that the entire gym has been sanctioned by the United States due to it being controlled by Ramzan Kadyrov, which makes it kind of a miracle that Khamzat Chimaev was able to fight in the United States. Also, as a final fun fact about all of this, back in 2016, Kadyrov decided to host an MMA tournament for child fighters, with some of the participants being as young as 8. The child fighters did not wear protective equipment like headgear or shin guards, and one of the fights actually ended in a TKO. These fights were broadcast on TV, and this led to the former Pride heavyweight champion and Russian MMA legend Fedor Emelianenko speaking out against Kadyrov, saying that the event was inexcusable and that the tournament violated multiple regulations. Then, just a few days after Fedor criticized Kadyrov, Fedor's daughter, the then 16-year-old Maria Emelianenko, was physically assaulted on her way home from school, which resulted in her being hospitalized for a contusion of the chest and abdomen. In the end, the Russian Ministry of Sport did end up concluding that Kadyrov had violated regulations and sent him a letter advising him on how to comply in the future. But they didn't punish him or the Chechen government. And to this day, the individual who attacked Fedor's daughter hasn't been identified, even though Kadyrov wanted the attacker to be identified by any means necessary. Which, is very, very, very kind of Mr. Kadyrov. So yes, in conclusion, the true secret technique you could use to beat Khamzat Chimaev and Magomed Ankalaev is to ask Vladimir Putin to shut off Ramzan Kadyrov's EBT card. Climent Club is a gym in Alicante, Spain that was founded in 2008 by the brothers Jorge and Agustin Climent, and for over 12 years was the home gym for the 2-weight division UFC champion Ilia Topuria. Jorge and Agustin Climent were originally from Buenos Aires, Argentina, where they trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and mixed martial arts, working their way up to the rank of purple belt in Jiu-Jitsu by their early 20s. However, the brothers decided to emigrate from Argentina when, in 2001, the Argentinian government imposed severe economic restrictions on the population in an attempt to stop the Argentinian Great Depression that had started back in 1998. Since the Climent brothers wanted to reach the UFC, they originally wanted to move to the United States or Brazil. But because of visa requirements, they ended up moving to Spain, where they could speak the language and had their ethnic roots. However, after arriving in Spain in 2002, the brothers found that mixed martial arts didn't even exist in the country yet, as the sport was considered to be taboo. This then led the Climent brothers down a different path. Instead of aiming to become UFC fighters themselves, they decided to become pioneers for mixed martial arts in the country. Goings were tough for them at the start, with the two of them scraping together a living by giving private lessons to those who wanted them and doing security work at nightclubs. And during this time, Jorge was involved in a horrible motorcycle accident that led to him having to get 16 surgeries. But the accident turned out to be a bit of a blessing in disguise, as the damages allowed the brothers to open up the Climent Club in 2008. The gym was in an old carpentry shop that the brothers refurbished with their own hands, and even after opening the gym, the brothers continued to work other jobs. Jorge also recalled that, when he held classes, he was afraid of the police busting in and shutting down the entire operation because mixed martial arts wasn't governed by a national federation in Spain at the time. But this all paid off, as in 2012, the brothers Alexandre and Ilya Topuria joined the gym. The Topuria brothers were the sons of Georgians who had relocated to Spain after the Russo-Georgian War of 2008, and they had a background in Greco-Roman wrestling from their time spent in Georgia. At the gym, the Climent brothers taught the Topuria brothers the art of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. When they were 16 and 15 respectively, Alexandre and Ilya were allowed by their father to quit school and pursue MMA full-time, and this dedication resulted in the Topuria brothers earning their black belts by their early 20s. And from here, we all know the story. Once Ilya tore through his opponents at promotions like Cage Warriors and Brave CF, Alexandre Topuria put his MMA career on hold to help support Ilya's rise through the UFC ranks. Ilya, with the support of the Climent brothers and Alexandre, proceeded to claim the UFC featherweight title from Volkanovski and defend it against Max Holloway. And while Ilya and Alexandre left the Climent Club prior to Ilya's fight with Charles Oliveira, this was not because of any bad blood. It was simply because the Topurias had moved from Alicante to Madrid, which made training at the club impossible because of the 4-hour drive. Ilya and Alexandre now train at a private facility in Madrid with new coaches, but there's no doubt that the Climent Club was instrumental in Ilya's success. And while the gym no longer has any UFC fighters, the Climent Club does have a number of prospects on the rise who might be getting close to getting the call. Notably, there is Salah Hamil, an undefeated Moroccan fighter who competes in PFL MENA, which is the PFL's regional league for the Middle East. Another is Pepe Torres, a Spaniard with a 10-1 record. And finally, there's Franco Tenaguila, who doesn't have the most extensive record in MMA, but is a champion in BKFC. Now, when you look at Ilya and Alexandre, you might initially believe that the style of fighting taught at Climent Club is boxing-centric. However, the Climent brothers are Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners beyond anything else, and this shows in the style of their fighters. If you look at Ilya's career prior to signing with the UFC, you would see that his first 7 wins were all by submission. And if you look at the wins of fighters like Salah and Pepe Torres, you'll see that most of them come from ground and pound or submission. The Jiu-Jitsu style of Climent Club fighters is all about securing an advantageous position like mount or back control before finishing the fight with a submission, with the fighters opting out of guard play and leg entanglements like someone like Charles Oliveira would. Another noteworthy point about specifically Ilya Topuria's training style is that he doesn't train MMA. Instead, he chooses to train boxing, wrestling, and grappling separately, and then bring them together once he is in camp. I don't know if this is Ilya's personal philosophy or something that was taught at Climent Club, but it is still something worth keeping note of. But yes, Climent Club is the pioneering MMA gym in Spain, and if you're living there, this is the place to train if you want to train with the best in the country. The CIT Performance Institute is an MMA gym in Pretoria, South Africa that was founded in 2018 by Morne Visser when members from Team CIT MMA and the Yard Athletic, which is a gym in Cape Town, came together to form a larger team. The CIT Performance Institute is South Africa's largest MMA gym and is one of the highest level training facilities on the African continent. Most notably, the CIT Performance Institute is home to the former UFC middleweight champion, Dricus du Plessis, who is also a co-owner of the gym. Now, I couldn't find much regarding Morne Visser's background and how he got into mixed martial arts, but on a page from EFC about Morne's brother, Ian Visser, who Mornay trained, I found that Ian Visser got into mixed martial arts because of his love of Thai boxing and wrestling, so I think we can assume that Mornay's background is quite similar. In addition to being one of the highest quality MMA gyms in Africa, one of the most unique parts of the CIT Performance Institute is how they pay their professional fighters to train there. They can do this because of the various sponsorship deals that the gym has. CIT sponsors include the supplement company USN, the coal delivery company SG Coal, and CIT Moto, which is a motor vehicle dealership owned by Mornay Visser himself. This system allows members of Team CIT MMA, which is the professional MMA fight team that trains at the Performance Institute, to train full-time without having to work a day job. In addition to its mixed martial arts program, the Performance Institute also has a boxing program for both professional and amateur fighters, a BJJ program for self-defense, and various other physical fitness courses for everyday individuals. Besides Dricus du Plessis, some notable fighters who train at the facility include the UFC bantamweight Cameron Saaiman, the middleweight Ultimate Fighter contestant Mark Hume, and the two-weight UFC champion and Ryzen fighter Nkazimulo Zulu. The style of CIT fighters is certainly unique. Dricus du Plessis, Cameron Saaiman, and Nkazimulo Zulu all have a background in kickboxing, with Dricus and Zulu both holding national titles in K1-style kickboxing. Many commentators have noted that the style of CIT fighters appears sloppy, with both Dricus du Plessis and Cameron Saaiman known for blitzing in while throwing wide, looping shots. For Cameron Saaiman, this has had mixed to negative results, as he won his Contender Series fight and first 3 fights in the UFC, but has gone on to suffer 3 losses in a row, including 2 brutal KO losses where shots were looped around his guard. But for Dricus du Plessis, this awkward style of striking allowed him to go toe-to-toe with elite strikers in his weight class like Israel Adesanya, Robert Whittaker, and Sean Strickland, with him finishing Adesanya and Whittaker and 50-45ing Strickland in their rematch. However, the visuals of their striking aside, the key common trait between all of CIT MMA's best fighters is their ability to fight out of both stances, with Dricus du Plessis finishing Robert Whittaker with a southpaw jab, Cameron Saaiman using stance switches to get a KO win on Dana White's Contender Series, and Nkazimulo Zulu KOing Joe Arai in his fight in Ryzen. A common weakness among fighters who train at Team CIT, however, is their lack of wrestling defense. While Dricus du Plessis is a solid offensive grappler, he showed in the Khamzat Chimaev fight that, while he's great at being the hammer, he kinda sucks at being the nail. In the first pro loss of his career, Cameron Saaiman was conclusively outgrappled by Christian Rodriguez, albeit Rodriguez was massively overweight for that fight. And in his challenge against Koji Horiguchi for the Ryzen Flyweight Championship, Nkazimulo Zulu was taken down and controlled multiple times, despite Horiguchi having a considerable size disadvantage. In addition to its awkward style, the CIT Performance Institute is known for a few other unique practices. One of those being fighters and coaches kissing each other as a greeting or as a way to celebrate, which is something that went quite viral after Dricus du Plessis kissed Mornay Visser on the lips after TKOing Robert Whittaker. Another strange thing that Mornay Visser does at Team CIT is how he uses a cattle prod to shock his fighters when they are not training hard enough or when they make a mistake. And although this is pretty strange and perhaps inhumane, Dricus believes it's quite effective. And well, as of me making this video, the whole of Team CIT is on a bit of a losing streak, with Dricus losing his belt, Cameron Saaiman being on a 3-fight loss streak, and Nkazimulo Zulu being beaten to pulp by Yuki Ito in the first round of the Ryzen Flyweight Grand Prix. So hopefully they can make some adjustments and come back stronger than before. Teixeira MMA and Fitness is a gym located in Bethel, Connecticut in the United States that was founded in 2014 by Glover Teixeira, who is a former UFC light heavyweight champion. Currently, Teixeira MMA and Fitness is the home gym for the 2-weight UFC champion Alex Pereira, who trains there along with his personal MMA coach Plinio Cruz. The gym was originally a private training facility for Glover Teixeira as he prepared for his UFC fights, but as time went on, he opened up the gym to other professional fighters and later on to amateurs and non-fighters as well. And after Glover Teixeira retired in 2023, he has been teaching and coaching full-time at the gym. Teixeira MMA and Fitness is characterized by its very open and welcoming gym culture, where people of all skill levels, from top pros to up-and-comers to total novices, train together in the same environment. This is because the gym is relatively new, with their current location in Bethel, Connecticut, having been opened in 2018. Most of the fighters who coach and train at Teixeira MMA and Fitness are Brazilian, with the former UFC fighter Kyle Magalhães being one of the primary instructors alongside Glover. In addition to Alex Pereira, other fighters who train there include UFC welterweight Wellington Turman, the former Bellator fighter Marcos Breno, and Aline Pereira, who is a karate combat champion and Alex Pereira's sister. Some fighters have trained part-time at the gym too, including UFC light heavyweight Dominic Reyes. One of the unique parts of Teixeira MMA and Fitness is that many of Alex Pereira's former opponents have gone to train at the gym. The most notable among them being Sean Strickland, who went to train at Teixeira MMA and Fitness after Alex knocked him out. Cesar Almeida, the kickboxer turned UFC fighter who faced Alex Pereira 3 times in kickboxing, has also trained at Teixeira MMA and Fitness in the past. And then there's Yusri Belgarui, who is 1-2 against Alex Pereira in kickboxing, who trains full-time at Teixeira MMA and Fitness and received a UFC contract through Dana White's Contender Series while training out of the gym. As a gym, Teixeira MMA and Fitness has done a solid job of teaching kickboxers like Alex Pereira and Yusri Belgarui the basics of takedown defense and submission defense, with Alex Pereira demonstrating this in his fight against Jan Blachowicz and in his first fight against Magomed Ankalaev. And he did lose that Ankalaev fight, but he managed to avoid getting taken down for the entirety of the fight. Teixeira MMA and Fitness is still quite new, and is yet to become a massive pro gym with a defined style or system like Extreme Couture, American Top Team, or Jackson Wink. But when you consider the sheer number of kids who are enrolled in their kids' classes, as well as the prospect of Alex Pereira's sons, who strike almost exactly like him, wanting to become MMA fighters and learning how to grapple from an early age from Glover Teixeira, there may be a future where we see the next generation of Brazilian killers emerge from this gym. So yes, if you live in Connecticut, and especially if you are a younger trainee who wants to develop into a fully fledged mixed martial artist, this is one of the best gyms to go to. You can also go to train there if you've been brutally slapped by Alex Pereira in the past. And, final fun fact, they do birthday parties. Chama. Valle Flow Striking Academy, or VFS Academy for short, is a gym located in the Chicago suburb of Bensenville, Illinois, that was founded in 2014 by head coach Mike Valle. The gym is home to fighters like UFC lightweight Ignacio Bahamondes, former UFC interim featherweight champion Yair Rodriguez, former 2-time women's bantamweight champion Juliana Pena, and of course, the one, the only, the GOAT, Belal, remember the name, Muhammad. Mike Valle, a man with a background in boxing and kickboxing, got his first big job as a coach at the famed Jackson Wink MMA Academy when a UFC fighter he had trained, Eric Goyito Perez, convinced Greg Jackson to bring in Mike as a striking trainer for the team. At Jackson Wink, Mike Valle met Gina Carano, one of the pioneers of women's MMA, who asked Mike to help develop her striking skills for her bouts in Strikeforce, which helped Mike finance his coaching career. While working at Jackson Wink, Mike Valle became well known for training fighters of Latin American origin, and even ran the Latin American program for the gym back in 2013. Mike Valle also was a coach for Tough Latin America Season 3. Mike Valle left Jackson Wink in 2014 to put the experience he had gained at the gym to good use, which led to him starting up Valle Flow Striking. At first, he was training fighters out of his garage, but this didn't stop Mike Valle and his fighters from producing results, as Yair Rodriguez, while he was training out of Mike Valle's garage, scored a highlight reel knockout against Andre Fili at UFC 197. One of the interesting parts of Valle Flow Striking is how Mike Valle deliberately keeps the team from going into a mega gym like ATT or Extreme Couture, despite having the top tier talent to attract more fighters and sparring partners. The pro MMA classes at Valle Flow Striking are limited to 20 participants per session, keeping a tight-knit team that allows Mike Valle to work with each fighter individually. One of the points that Mike Valle prides himself on personally is his ability to hold pads well, which is something I agree with when considering some of the shots that Yair Rodriguez and Ignacio Bahamondes have landed on their opponents in the past. Fighters training out of this gym tend to be mostly Latin American, although there are a number of exceptions, including Bel Goat. If I were to say one thing that Valle flow striking fighters are good at, it would have to be distance management. We saw this demonstrated by Ignacio Bahamondes' KO over Miguel Torres with a slick counter right, and in Bilal's performance against Leon Edwards, where he was able to close range against the longer Edwards by keeping Leon on the end of his jab at all times. And if I were to describe the gym's weakness, it would be their difficulty dealing with stance switchers. Yair Rodriguez struggled against Volkanovski switching stances throughout their title unification bout, with Yair eventually being caught with a switching right hook that led to a TKO finish. The same goes for Ignacio Bahamondes, who got outstruck by Rafael Fiziev, who threw body kicks out of both stances to outpoint the much taller Chilean. And in his title defense, Bilal was unable to keep up with the smooth footwork of Jack Della Maddalena, who incorporated stance switching and the dart to tear him apart over 5 rounds. Also, I don't know why, but the fighters from this gym tend to end up being hated a ton by fans. Juliana Pena is seen as annoying, Yair Rodriguez is thought of as entitled, as he thought he deserved a title shot after beating a debuting Patricio Pitbull while coming off of a 2-fight loss streak, and on top of that, he's beefing with a fan favorite in Diego Lopez. And well, Bilal is Bilal. Although I think more and more people are coming to like Bilal after his war with JDM and win over Kamaru Usman, where he TKO'd Kamaru Usman by making him cry on his own podcast to the point where Usman won't release the video of their conversation. But, love them or hate them, this is a small and very elite team of fighters, and they deserve to have their names remembered. The Blackbelt Japan is an MMA gym headquartered in Kashiwa City, Chiba Prefecture, that also has a major branch in Naha, Okinawa, which is where the UFC flyweight top contender Tetsuro Taira trains. The head of the team is Hiroshi Tsuruya, who is the father of the UFC fighter Rei Tsuruya. The Blackbelt Japan traces its origins back to Yuki Nakai, a shoot fighter who is considered to be one of the first popularizers of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Japan. Back in 1995, Yuki Nakai, who was the first ever Shuto welterweight champion, participated in the Valle Tudo Japan one-night tournament. During this tournament, Nakai was badly eye-gouged by the Dutch kickboxer Gerard Gordeau, causing permanent damage that would eventually leave him blind. Despite his injury, Nakai submitted Gordeau with a leg lock and made it to the finals of the tournament, where he faced Rickson Gracie and lost by rear naked choke. After losing to Gracie, Nakai retired from fighting due to his eye injury and began teaching Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to Japanese fighters. In 1997, Nakai opened his first gym, Paraestra Tokyo, where he taught many students, including Shinya Aoki, who became a black belt under Nakai's tutelage. Throughout the early 90s, more and more fighters opened their own Paraestra gyms. And importantly for the story of Blackbelt Japan, in 1999, the MMA fighter and grappler Hiroshi Tsuruya opened his own branch of the gym in Matsudo, a city in Chiba Prefecture. At his gym, Hiroshi Tsuruya trained Hiromasa Ogikubo, a Rizin Bantamweight Grand Prix champion who also defeated Alexander Pantoja on The Ultimate Fighter, and Ryota Matsune, a Shudo Bantamweight champion who went on to start a Paraestra gym in his homeland of Okinawa. And at Paraestra Okinawa, Ryota Matsune discovered and began training Tetsuro Taira, who has now become Japan's most successful UFC fighter since Kyoji Horiguchi. And while Taira was rising up the UFC ranks, Hiroshi was training his own son, Rei Tsuruya, who would later go on to win a UFC contract by winning the Road to UFC tournament. Recognizing that they were both capable of training fighters that could find success in the UFC, Hiroshi Tsuruya and Ryota Matsune decided it would be in their best interests to form a closer-knit team than the association they already had as members of the Paraestra network. This led to all Paraestra gyms in Chiba Prefecture and Ryota Matsune's Paraestra Okinawa announcing their independence from the Paraestra network to form the Blackbelt Japan, a team of top Japanese fighters with the goal of producing fighters who could compete on the global stage. The Blackbelt Japan's top 3 fighters are Tetsuro Taira, Rei Tsuruya, and Hiromasa Ogikubo, but they also have other notable fighters, like the Greco-Roman Wrestling Olympic silver medalist and Rizin fighter Shinobu Ota, and the Road to UFC participant Kanda Koya. The Blackbelt Japan style is almost entirely about technical wrestling and control, with Hiromasa Ogikubo and Rei Tsuruya receiving criticism at times for being boring fighters due to their very grappling-heavy styles. However, it is nonetheless effective, and as we saw in Taira's fight with Alex Perez, and at certain points in Ray Tsuruya's fight with Joshua Van, some of the takedowns that fighters from Blackbelt Japan use are very unique and unpredictable, making it difficult for fighters who are used to traditional single and double leg takedowns to defend them. And in his fight against Pantoja on The Ultimate Fighter, and in his victory against Kaya Sakura, Hiromasa Ogikubo demonstrated his prowess as a wrestler and top player by constantly taking his opponents down and neutralizing them. Fighters from the Black Belt Japan are able to implement this style because of their focus on technique, with the branch in Okinawa run by Matsune in particular prioritizing grappling technique over all else, as the gym is known for foregoing on sparring in favor of doing drills until techniques become second nature. The real weakness of fighters who train at the Black Belt Japan is the lack of damaging striking, which leads to them having nothing to fall back on if their grappling doesn't work. This was most evident in Tetsuro Taira and Ray Tsuruya's losses to Brandon Royval and Joshua Van, where Taira and Tsuruya were lost on the feet after having their grappling neutralized. And in Hiromasa Ogikubo's career, 22 of his 29 professional wins are by decision, which just further highlights the difficulty that the Black Belt Japan's elite grapplers have with finishing fights. Ogikubo has also lost to Koji Horiguchi 3 times, which was in large part due to Horiguchi neutralizing Ogikubo's wrestling and beating Ogikubo in the striking. However, the trainers at the Black Belt Japan know that these are issues and are striving to make improvements. In his most recent fight against Hyun-Sung Park, Tetsuro Taira demonstrated a significantly improved striking offense by dropping Park in the first round with a straight right, then using the threat of his striking to set up a takedown in the second round, leading to him submitting Park with a face crank. In Tsuruya's case, he went abroad to train with Henry Cejudo, another wrestler who developed into a competent striker, and while we haven't seen him back in the octagon since, he at least is aware that he must improve his striking in order to improve as a fighter. But yes, the Black Belt Japan is the most successful modern Japanese MMA gym, and their MMA grappling is definitely some of the highest level in the world. The MMA Factory is a gym in Paris, France, that was founded in 2013 by Fernand Lopez Oenyebe. Like his former student Francis Ngannou, Fernand Lopez was born in Cameroon, where his father enrolled him in taekwondo and judo classes from an early age to toughen him up and help him fight off bullies, which resulted in Fernand earning black belts in both disciplines. He also took up wrestling and rugby, and he ended up getting a spot on the national freestyle wrestling team. However, Fernand Lopez abused what he learned in martial arts, using his skills to intimidate and harm others. According to an article from Bloody Elbow, Lopez says that he was obsessed with being a superhero who defended the weak from the strong, but it was this kind of thinking that resulted in him getting into many violent confrontations. One time, after trying to defend his girlfriend's younger brother from bullies, Fernand Lopez was stabbed and beaten so badly that it was reported by the Cameroonian news that he was dead. However, Fernand Lopez survived, and legally immigrated in 1997 to France, where he worked as an electrical engineer. There, after suffering a neck injury that ended his semi-professional rugby career, Fernand Lopez discovered Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and began to train in the art. From 2006 to 2010, Lopez fought as a professional MMA fighter, where he amassed a record of 10-7 before retiring to become a coach. From there, he worked with the Parisian police officer Vincent Trebel to open a gym called CrossFight, which would later be renamed to the MMA Factory. The MMA Factory is far and ahead the largest MMA gym in France, with hundreds of fighters training there. Most of the fighters training at the gym come from an immigrant background, with many hailing from sub-Saharan Africa or the Caucasus. The most notable fighter under Fernand Lopez's tutelage is former UFC interim heavyweight champion Cyril Gane. Besides that, his former students include Francis Ngannou, Nassourdine Imavov, Taylor Lapillus, William Gomis, and regional MMA star and Aries FC champion Bansangur Chamsudanov, who is more commonly known as Baki because of his resemblance to the protagonist of the popular martial arts anime. And well, there's a couple reasons why there are so many fighters who formerly trained at the MMA Factory. First, starting with the training at the MMA Factory, it isn't bad, as the gym did make Cyril Gane and Nassourdine Imavov into competent strikers with good footwork. However, the gym is notorious for its lack of MMA wrestling, which was truly exposed by the growth of Francis Ngannou. While he was training at the MMA Factory, Francis Ngannou lost a dominant 50-44 decision to Stipe Miocic, who out-wrestled and outworked Ngannou despite a significant size disadvantage, nearly finishing Ngannou with ground strikes multiple times throughout the fight. And once Francis Ngannou left the MMA Factory in 2018 and began to train at Extreme Couture, he showed multiple improvements. He defended all of Stipe's takedowns in the rematch and KO'd him in the second round to win the heavyweight title, then defended the belt against his former training partner Cyril Gane with badly injured knees by wrestling him to get a unanimous decision win. And even in his most recent fight against Renan Ferreira, Francis took Renan down in the first round and knocked him out with ground and pound. The same applies to Nassourdine Imavov, who was being outgrappled by Phil Hawes while he was at the MMA Factory, but is now on track to face Khamzat Chimaev for the middleweight title at the time of me making this video. In contrast, Cyril Gane has stagnated, losing in humiliating fashion to John Jones via guillotine choke, and being very clearly beaten by Alexander Volkov, who out-wrestled him as well. However, the problems with the MMA Factory don't end there. The gym has been mired in scandal after scandal, with Fernand Lopez at the center of them. First, when he was asked about why Ngannou left the MMA Factory, Fernand Lopez said that he had once asked Ngannou to leave the gym because Ngannou refused to pay the yearly membership fee of €600 after his fight with Anthony Hamilton in 2016. However, I'm left to question this story because although a lot of people are coming around to the fact that Ngannou has left the PFL hanging in regards to their deal, there is concrete evidence that Ngannou pays his coaches well. Here is Eric Nixick talking about how much Francis paid him after Francis's boxing match with Tyson Fury.
It was the most money I've ever been paid by a fighter. It was unbelievable. You know, it was more than I expected. I wasn't expecting, you know, and obviously Francis is always taking great care of me. But it floored me. Like when I saw my Wells Fargo account that morning, and it literally brought me to tears. That's a true story. Literally brought me to tears because he changed my life, you know, and not only from a professional standpoint, but a monetary standpoint. It allowed me a lot of financial freedom to be able to enjoy my coaching, enjoy being a dad and a husband. And
so I'm just left to wonder about those €600, you know? And that's not the only problem with Fernand Lopez. After winning at PFL Europe 3, the kickboxer turned MMA fighter Cedric Doumbé said that he had witnessed Lopez commit acts of domestic violence against a former romantic partner. After these accusations, Lopez came out and admitted that he had indeed been arrested, convicted, and jailed for 4 months for domestic violence against his ex-wife in 2018, where he struck her and strangled her. However, during this confession, Lopez also said that his ex-wife had been violent towards himself, his daughter from a prior relationship, and their granddaughter, which resulted in his ex-wife releasing a statement accusing Lopez of slandering her. Fernand Lopez has been involved in multiple contractual disputes, as he was not just the owner of the MMA Factory, but also the #1 MMA manager in the country. This meant that he was in charge of handling the careers of fighters who train at his gym. But not only that, up until 2024, Fernand Lopez was the owner and CEO of Aries FC, which is the largest MMA organization in France. He was forced to sell the organization due to having run Aries FC into near bankruptcy. So for a very long time, Fernand Lopez was a gym owner, a manager, a promoter, and a matchmaker for the French MMA scene, meaning that you had to interact with Fernand Lopez if you were a French MMA fighter. And if you wanted a favorable matchup for your fights in Aries FC, you had to be training at the MMA Factory and under his management. He also controlled the fighter contracts with Aries FC and abused this power. In one noteworthy case, Lopez refused to let Slim Tbilisi, an undefeated champion in Aries FC, fight in the UFC because Slim was signed with Dominance MMA, which is Ali Abdelaziz's management firm. This led to Tbilisi being released from the UFC before his very first fight, which resulted in Tbilisi spending his career in Bellator and the PFL. Also, in 2023, Lopez was made the matchmaker for PFL Europe, which further strengthened his control over French MMA. However, most of Fernand Lopez's best fighters, including Nassourdine Imavov, William Gomis, and Baki, have left the gym and are now training with Nicolas Ott, who also used to be a coach at the MMA Factory. Nicolas Ott, who also trains UFC lightweight Benoit Saint-Denis, is building a new team for MMA fighters that seems on track to becoming the most successful MMA gym in France, as we have seen Saint-Denis, Imavov, and Gomi put on successful performances against their opposition during the UFC Paris card in September of 2025, where Saint-Denis and Imavov beat two highly touted members of the Fighting Nerds gym in Mauricio Ruffi and Caio Borralho. But despite the setbacks and scandals that Fernand Lopez has faced, which have almost entirely been a result of his own poor choices and mismanagement, the man isn't finished yet. He still has Cyril Gane, who he ran cover for by saying to Tom Aspinall's face that Gane wasn't ducking him before Tom got the belt, and he also has a new heavyweight prospect by the name of Dave Fotsing. And, well, Fernand is saying that Dave is more of a wrestler. Which, well, based on how many times Lopez has lied in the past, I'll believe him when I see it. Team Renegade is a gym based in Longbridge, Birmingham, England that was founded in 2013. Originally, Team Renegade was a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym. However, in 2018, a nearby MMA gym called the Ultimate Training Center closed down, leading to fighters who were formerly at that gym, like Leon Edwards and Tom Breese, joining Team Renegade, after which the gym started MMA sessions. In addition to Leon Edwards and Tom Breese, some notable fighters who train at Team Renegade include Fabian Edwards, who is the 2025 PFL middleweight tournament champion and Leon's younger brother, and the UFC lightweight Jai Herbert. There's also Veronica Hardy, a UFC fighter competing in the women's flyweight division, who is married to the former UFC welterweight Dan Hardy. The UFC featherweight top contender Arnold Allen has also trained at the gym extensively, although Allen also trains at BKK Fighters in Colchester and spends time at TriStar Gym in Canada under Firas Zahabi. Team Renegade was originally based in Kings Heath, but the gym was forced to close down during the pandemic, forcing the fighters to train at home on mats that they brought in and installed in whatever spare space they had. However, the gym had a huge revival in 2022 when Leon Edwards shocked the world by knocking out the pound-for-pound #1 fighter Kamaru Usman in the 5th round and claiming the UFC welterweight title in a comeback victory. The man who inspired Leon to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat, Dave Lovell, is a boxing coach at the gym and served as a father figure for the Edwards brothers, as their own father had passed away in a gang-related shooting while they were still teens. Although Team Renegade was originally a BJJ gym, the fighters there are most known for their long-range striking, with Jai Herbert and Leon Edwards both doing the best at kicking range, and Fabian Edwards too winning his PFL championship with a devastating head kick. However, this style has often been criticized as boring, with Leon Edwards receiving a lot of criticism for his title defense against Colby Covington, where he spent most of his bout kicking Colby at range and not going for the finish. Fighters from Team Renegade also tend to struggle with being pressured, with Jai Herbert suffering a devastating KO loss at the hands of Ilia Topuria due to being backed up to the fence, and Leon Edwards losing his belt to Bilal Muhammad because of the effectiveness of Bilal's lead handwork and wrestling. One interesting story from Team Renegade is how the UFC welterweight, Ian Gary, was banned from the gym at Leon's request, with Leon saying that Ian Gary did not follow the rules or the spirit of the gym. Veronica Hardy backed this claim up by saying that Ian Gary did not follow basic rules and implied that Gary gossiped about others. And finally, Paddy Pimblett came out and said that Leon Edwards had knocked out Gary in sparring before at the gym, and Ian Gary sort of implied that he had been caught by the same kick that landed on Usman, so there may be some truth to this claim. But anyways, the gym is one of the most popular in England, and it's open to everybody except Ian Gary. MMA Masters is a gym located in Hialeah, Miami County, Florida, that was founded in 2009 by Cesar Carneiro and Daniel Valverde. Notable fighters who train at the gym include Colby Covington, Nate Landwehr, Priscilla Cachoeira, and Gabriel Fernandez. And some fighters who have trained at the gym in the past include Ricardo Lamas, Ilia Topuria, and Themba Gorimbo. With Themba forming a close friendship with Colby Covington while training at MMA Masters, although Colby and Themba ended up having a falling out later on when Colby tried to kick Themba out of the treadmill room at the UFC PI while they were cutting weight. Daniel Valverde is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt with an extensive record of competition in the early 2000s. However, Cesar Carneiro is who really makes this gym unique. Because while most striking coaches at MMA gyms have a background in boxing, kickboxing, or Muay Thai, Cesar Carnerio's backbone discipline is capoeira. Carnerio began training in capoeira when he was 6 years old, and spent over a decade learning the striking style. He would also later on learn boxing and Muay Thai, but he has taught his capoeira style to a number of his students. Most notably, Colby Covington, who is typically thought of as your run-of-the-mill folk-style American wrestler, was throwing tornado kicks in his fight against Joaquin Buckley. Another one of his students, Gabriel Fernandez, head-kicked and then submitted the undefeated Wang Kong, who was a -900 favorite in that fight. So yes, while capoeira might not be the most practical martial art out there for mixed martial arts, this is the gym to go to if you want to learn how to actually implement those wild techniques into your striking repertoire, as Cesar is the only MMA coach I've been able to find who has a background in this fighting style. However, the weakness of fighters from MMA Masters has got to be their striking defense. While they are both very tough, Colby Covington and Nate Landwehr have both suffered multiple losses where they were picked apart with boxing combinations, with Colby being beaten to pulp by Buckley, and Nate being TKO'd by Du Hu Choi and Morgan Charriere. However, even if it's just for the capoeira alone, this gym makes itself stand out. Marquez MMA is a mixed martial arts gym in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania that was founded in 2012 by a head coach, John Marquez. The team was created when Daniel Gracie, the cousin and student of Renzo Gracie, who ran the BJJ gym called Renzo Gracie Philly, came into contact with John Marquez, who is running a small team called EEFC. With John Marquez's striking knowledge and Daniel Gracie's grappling, the Marquez MMA team was formed. And while Daniel Gracie has since left the team to build his own jiu-jitsu school, John Marquez continues to lead the gym. Notable fighters who are part of the team include UFC welterweight top contender Sean Brady, UFC middleweight Andre Petrosky, UFC featherweight Pat Sabatini, former UFC light heavyweight and PFL champion Corey Anderson, and of course, we can't forget the salty man himself, UFC middleweight Joe Pyfer.
Joe. What's going on, buddy? Speaking of embracing the memes, when is the nickname going to be officially changed from body bags to body cam off, Python?
Bro, I love that. See, that's the one part that started out as like a negative thing, like people saying I was like racist and all this shit, and now I think it's hilarious. So yeah, it's possible in the future. I love that. You know, body cam off. I'm here to kill a motherfucker.
The retired UFC lightweight turned only good UFC broadcast commentator Paul Felder also trains at this gym. The gym is also one of the main training grounds in the US for fighters from Uzbekistan, with the most notable guy there being the UFC middleweight Nursultan Ruzaboyev. And when the entire Marquez MMA team goes out to eat together, they frequent a local Uzbek restaurant. John Marquez's philosophy is to make the training at the gym as close to the fight as possible. This is why Marquez keeps the clock out of sight during rounds and encourages his fighters to coach each other during sparring. John Marquez also does extensive tape study when he is not at the gym, and for his top students like Sean Brady, he keeps track of everything they work on in camp to ensure optimal preparation. One other thing that fighters from Marquez MMA do to ensure they are prepared for their fights is competing in professional grappling. Sean Brady, Joe Pyfer, and Andre Petrosky all compete very frequently in the Fury Pro Grappling League, and Pat Sabatini is a reigning and defending Fury Pro Grappling champion. And the opponents these guys are facing aren't pushovers either. Andre Petrosky beat Oven St. Preux, Joe Pyfer beat Gerald Mearshart, and Sean Brady even beat Craig Jones, albeit that was in a modified rules bout where leg locks were banned. The style of Marquez MMA is all about top pressure, with their most successful fighters all having a strong wrestling and top game that allows them to enforce their will onto their opponents. The best way to describe their style would be smothering, where the opponent is drowned until they are forced to tap or get outpointed. The best examples of this include Sean Brady mauling Leon Edwards and Gilbert Burns, and almost all of Pat Sabatini's wins in the UFC. Joe Pyfer and Andre Petrosky as well have a couple wins by submission and decision that they got by setting up takedowns. The limitation of the gym tends to be in the fighter striking, as while their boxing is sound, the techniques that Marquez MMA fighters tend to throw are very basic. This was most evident in Joe Pyfer's performance against Kelvin Gastelum, where he was able to knock down Kelvin multiple times, but was unable to finish him due to an over-reliance on the big right hand. Sean Brady also used to have issues with letting his hands go, which was exposed in his fight against the GOAT, Bilal Muhammad, but has since improved significantly. And if you want to learn more about this gym, I would highly recommend this documentary that John Gooden filmed with Marquez MMA on the UFC Fight Pass YouTube channel. It has some pretty funny moments, including Sean Brady telling Joe Pyfer to be less salty. Bangtao Muay Thai is an MMA gym located in Phuket, Thailand that was founded in 2021 by the brothers George and Frank Hickman. The Hickman brothers were originally college wrestlers, but they began their journey into MMA when George found an advertisement for the Tiger Muay Thai tryouts, which were a scholarship program that allowed promising MMA talent to come and train in Thailand at Tiger Muay Thai for a year. George went to Thailand, passed the tryouts, and became a part of the team at Tiger Muay Thai. After compiling a couple of professional fights, George found himself becoming more and more interested in coaching. This led to George and his brother, Frank, coaching at Tiger Muay Thai, with Frank becoming Alexander Volkanovski's wrestling coach. Together, the brothers, along with BJJ coach Alex Schild, coached Volk to his first victory against Max Holloway. However, when the pandemic struck in 2020, Tiger Muay Thai was forced to close down, during which time the Hickman brothers began to think about starting up their own MMA gym in Thailand. And in 2021, after overcoming hurdles like language barriers and red tape around foreigners owning businesses in Thailand, the Hickman brothers were able to finally open Bangtao Muay Thai. And at the gym's grand opening, Volkanovski and the top-ranked kickboxer Superbon did special seminars for the students there, which has since become one of the unique selling points of the gym. Multiple legendary athletes have conducted seminars at Bangtao Muay Thai, including Anderson Silva, Michael Bisping, George St. Pierre, Tyson Fury, Craig Jones, and Kelvin Gastelum. Oh, and there was this violent criminal who ran from Tom Aspinall who did a seminar at the gym there once too, where I'm pretty sure he taught his students how to eye poke effectively or something along those lines. Besides Volk, some notable fighters who have trained at Bangtao Muay Thai include UFC strawweight champion Zhang Weili, UFC and Rising Light Heavyweight champion Yuri Prohaska, and UFC heavyweight blob maxer Tai Tuivasa. Bangtao Muay Thai, much like Tiger Muay Thai, is primarily a striking gym, teaching the same Muay Thai for MMA that is taught at Tiger Muay Thai. One of the less talked about achievements of Bangtao Muay Thai is how they got Loma Lukmanbi, a female Muay Thai fighter, to become the first Thai UFC fighter. Thais are known for avoiding MMA, preferring to fight in Muay Thai and kickboxing due to their cultural norms. And when they do compete in MMA, they tend to lack the grappling skills necessary to win. However, Bangtao trained Loma and gave her the defensive wrestling skills necessary to implement her Muay Thai in the UFC, which is a solid achievement for the team. Bangtao Muay Thai is also a huge gym when it comes to its sheer size, with a cage that has the same dimensions as the UFC's octagon for fight nights and numbered events, multiple boxing rings for Muay Thai fighters, loads of mat space for rolling, and as much strength and conditioning equipment as you could want. They even have a restaurant attached to the gym. One final point of note is the gym's Bangtao Brawl Fight Nights, where up-and-coming fighters compete in Muay Thai, MMA, and grappling while people eat, drink, and watch along. All of these fights are free to watch on Bangtao Muay Thai's YouTube channel. But yeah, Bangtao Muay Thai? Very similar to Tiger Muay Thai. Kings MMA is an MMA gym based in California that was founded in 2010 by the former shootbox fighter Rafael Cordeiro. Before making his name as one of the most respected coaches in mixed martial arts, Cordeiro competed in Brazil and helped corner legendary fighters like Vanderlei Silva, Mauricio Shogun Rua, and Anderson Silva. After coming to the US to start his own gym, when he was thinking about the name, Rafael Cordeiro was originally thinking of calling it the Rafael Cordeiro Fight Center, but decided the name was too long. Then, upon opening the Bible and finding the Book of Kings, he decided that that would be a fitting name for the gym. The best year in Kings MMA history was 2015, when Rafael dos Anjos defeated Anthony Pettis to claim the UFC Lightweight Championship and then proceeded to defend the title against Cowboy Cerrone. At the same time, Fabricio Verdum produced the upset of the year by submitting Cain Velasquez to become the UFC Heavyweight Champion, making Kings MMA the home to 2 UFC champions. This led to the gym attracting even more talent, with fighters like UFC lightweight Beneil Dariush, UFC middleweight Marvin Vettori, UFC featherweight Giga Chikadze, and UFC middleweight Kelvin Gastelum all training at the gym. Also, during his UFC tenure, the Pride legend and former UFC light heavyweight champion Shogun Rua trained at Kings MMA. Cordeiro stresses that he pushes his fighters to give it their all in the gym, with Beneil Dariush commenting in the past on how the intensity of the training at the gym is unlike anything he's felt before. As was the case with Shootbox, Kings MMA is also known for its notoriously hard sparring, which leaves fighters bad already, but also prone to injuries. As Rafael Cordeiro said in a 2020 interview with the UFC, quote, "I prepare my students for wars, not just to go in there and you want to just beat them. You want to be nice. No, you want to be there. You're going to be bleeding. You're going to feel tired. It's good." This brawling style has led to fighters who have trained before at Kings MMA putting on absolute wars, as we've seen many times from the likes of Marvin Vettori and Kelvin Gastelum, but it's also led to fighters like Beneil Dariush and Shogun Rua maybe taking a bit too much damage for their own good. Pitbull Brothers are an MMA gym with multiple branches, but have their main location set in Natal, Rio Grande do Norte, Brazil. And as you might have guessed from the name, the gym was started by the brothers Patricio and Patricky Pitbull, and their late coach, Bruno Govina. The brothers originally trained in Jiu-Jitsu under Alexandre Bosco, where they earned their black belts before making the transition to MMA. Together, the brothers became a staple of the MMA promotion Bellator, with Patricio becoming the organization's greatest and longest reigning champion. However, after Bellator was purchased by the PFL, Patricio left for the UFC while Patricky signed with Rizin. Although the brothers are in the twilight of their careers, they are continuing to fight and train at the gym, with many of them working with fighters on the Brazilian regional scene. Although there are no UFC fighters at Pitbull Brothers besides Patricio, one of the most unique stylistic aspects of the gym is its integration of karate into the striking systems there. While he was at Bellator, Patricio Pitbull became very well known for his use of karate to blitz in and land his right hand, or to get his opponent to crash in and land the right hand as a counter. Patricio learned how to fight this way from the Brazilian national karate coach, Mano Santana, to help make up for Patricio's limited reach as a featherweight. Using this karate blitz, Patricio successfully KO'd Michael Chandler to win the Bellator lightweight title, and successfully defended his featherweight title against future Bellator and Rising champion Juan Archuleta. Pitbull's success in Bellator led to Henry Cejudo training with Mano Santana, which led to Cejudo's famous bladed stance, which he employed to great success in his fights against Wilson Hayes and Dominic Cruz. Paulo Costa also came in the past to train with the Pitbull Brothers to help prepare himself to fight Robert Whittaker, who employs a similar karate blitz to Patricio. For further analysis on this topic, I would highly recommend Jack Slack's Filthy Casual's guide on Patricio Pitbull's karate blitz, as he explains it way better than myself. And if you look at the Pitbull Brothers gym, you will see that they continue to offer karate classes, which makes it very unique among MMA gyms. Four Ounce MMA is a mixed martial arts gym in Houston, Texas that was founded in 2007 by Jeremy Mahon, who then sold the business in 2009 to Adrian Solids, who then sold the gym to the current owner, head coach, and former UFC fighter Daniel Pineda. The gym is the home of UFC flyweight top contender Joshua Van and the UFC flyweight prospect Alden Correa. Although the gym was relatively unknown prior to the rapid rise of Joshua Van through the UFC flyweight rankings, some fighters of note, including Derek Lewis and Daniel Pineda himself, have trained at the gym in the past. The team at 4 Ounce MMA is still relatively small, with the only UFC fighters on the team being Joshua Van, Alden Correa, and Michael Aswell. However, this small team does do one thing really well, which is teaching its fighters to box effectively with 4-ounce gloves. Both Joshua Van and Alden Correa have demonstrated their proficiency with boxing in the pocket with 4-ounce gloves, with Joshua Van outstriking top contender Brandon Royval and Alden Correa knocking out Alessandro Costa, whose only prior losses in the UFC were to currently ranked opposition like Steve Erceg and Amir Albazi. Unlike many other MMA gyms, 4-Ounce MMA offers no classes for traditional gi jiu-jitsu, but instead offers dedicated classes for no-gi grappling and wrestling, which may stem from Daniel Pineda's preference for avoiding training in the gi while preparing for a fight. And this is just a minor side note, but Take a look at this ridiculous ad they used to have for the gym that's still up and viewable on their Yelp page. But yes, now that the gym has produced one of the hottest prospects in the sport, who not only is building hype, but is doing so at flyweight of all weight classes, we may see more and more fighters choose to travel to Houston to train at 4-ounce MMA. Anyways, that is the end of this video. Now, I know, you're asking, where's TriStar? Where's Jackson Wink? Where's Tom Aspinall's heavyweight super gym? And you see, the reason why I haven't covered those yet is because those gyms have extremely recognizable, casual-friendly fighters who I can put in the thumbnail to draw people in. Like, if you're a fan who is just getting to MMA, would you click on a video with Sean Brady in the thumbnail? Probably not. Even though after making this video and learning more about Marquez MMA, I've personally come to think that their gym is one of the most interesting in the sport. So yes, if you want me to cover more MMA gyms, and especially TriStar, because I swear, all of the comments on the first video were TriStar this and TriStar that, and thanks, and GSP that, and Faraz Sahabi talking about the gym on JRE. So yes, make sure to like and subscribe for part 3, where I will finally do TriStar. Goodbye.